And wait.
Let's all go buy some lottery tickets.
Oh man, we were such spring children at the time, right?
Mike,
Man, we had so much hope, so much hope. Just dashed.
Oh my,
just dashed.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
So
I mean, what more can we say?
I don't want to.
Yeah. Like we've said a lot.
Yeah, I don't really know what else to say.
There is nothing else to say. Let's just move on, man. Hello and welcome back to Toronto Till I Die, the Toronto FC fan show. I'm Mike Newell, and finally we got an end of season press conference like 20 days after the season ended. So despite what the intro said, we will actually have a lot to say on that topic. But we will also get to that. We will talk about the remainder of our over-under selections that we made for the 2023 season, and you continue to point jokes and laugh at us as we get a lot of things wrong in terms of our preseason predictions. And of course, we will get to the burning question presented by Nesker. Lots to dig into, so let's jump right into it with my co-hosts, Jeffrey P. Nesker and Michael Singh, and of course, our special guest, the editor-in-chief of TFC Republic, Mr. John Molinaro. John, thanks for joining us again. You're always a welcomed and esteemed guest here. I'm sure you have a lot to say about the press conference, but before we do that, I think you've been on the show before when we get into sort of like our food corner stuff. I know, Jeff, you want to talk
Food
about
Odyssey.
Food Odyssey.
Well,
so I'll let you
no, I
take it away.
flagged this. Yeah, I flagged this listening back last week because we talked about hot dogs. We were ostensibly talking about Mike's crusts off taco order, but it ventured into hot dogs, and we didn't really do it justice, gents, because I'm just going to say it. Let's have everybody's ultimate street dog. I know we've all had street dogs before, so what's your ultimate toppings on a hot dog?
All right, John, you're the guest, so you can go first.
He's going to say pineapple.
Yeah, pineapple. No, I'm just a simple sort of mustard and sort of onions. And I mean, if you have chili sauce, then I'm down for that. I like hot and spicy stuff, like food to begin with. So you give me mustard and onions and sort of chili sauce, then I'm good.
But you're obviously putting that on a spicy Italian sausage, right? Like if they've got that on offer, you're not getting a hot dog. Section.
I've been known to have a hot dog every once in a while. So
yeah, they're unavoidable in North America. I think you I mean, especially if you go to a Blue Jays game on Tuesdays, which is
do you know who you're talking to, buddy?
Yeah.
I touched on it last week, man, and just like the way I like my tacos, my street meat is just mayo and barbecue sauce. Those are the two combos that I like on some street meat. Every time I say something about food, Mike Newell just gives me the worst shake of the head. I feel like I'm in trouble.
No, I'm just very for that kind of stuff I am particular. So don't take my word as gospel on it, because I probably have weird things that people are going to look at me and be like, why do you do that? I am simply ketchup. Give me a street dog, give me ketchup. That again, we talked about this last week.
You're my favorite customer in front of me in the lineup. Like because most people are like me and they go for everything. I'm gonna tell you mine. So sauerkraut, absolutely. If sauerkraut's on offer, it's going on the hot dog. Fake bacon bits, absolutely. Ketchup, mustard, mayo, if it's there, absolutely. Pickles, absolutely. And I still remember when street meat in Toronto had cheese. I remember when they had cheese, and then when it was like a cheeky thing where you sort of had to like know the secret handshake, you're like, I wonder if there's any cheese here. And then the guy would take it out because it became illegal to do it because cheese spoils really, really quickly. And nobody was adhering to any, I had so many dodgy street meat dogs where I put cheese on them and then I had to scoop the cheese out because it was disgusting. And I still miss the cheese on my street meat dogs. So yeah, I guess I win because I put more. If it's a quantity thing, I win because I put the most on my hot dog.
I
And
feel
that's
like
kind of where I wanted to go.
the
with
only
that.
winner of street meat is the one who doesn't throw up at the end of eating it. So if you can avoid that, we're all winners. Okay. So there you go. That's our Food Odyssey corner, presented by nobody, just by ourselves.
Presented by me.
Yeah, presented by JPN.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Let's jump into it. Friday, end of season press conference. It's something we kind of, us TFC sickos kind of look forward to every year. Good, bad, or ugly, in terms of how it goes. I think this one in this particular season has taken a bit of a different tone and maybe a different sort of narrative. I mean, it's definitely about what players and management said, but I think there's also this other narrative around the actual kind of state of the club and the media around it, in terms of just where it stands in terms of, I guess, cultural relevance. Maybe that's the way to put it. And John, I would love to get your opinion on this, because one, you were there, one of three,
the meme king himself. I mean, come
that
on.
were there. I think you snapped. No, sorry, your colleague Neil Davidson snapped a picture of yourself there, and of course Brendan Dunlop also was there as well. Maybe I just want to get your overall impression before we get into what players and management said. Just your overall opinion, because you've been to a lot of these. So, sort of, what was your overall thought on the state of the press conference?
Where to begin? Yeah, it's the fact that they could only draw 3 reporters there. The fact that we're in a press room, and Michael has been in that room, and he knows how big it is, and he knows how many sort of chairs they tend to set up for press conferences. To have more sort of empty chairs in that room than actual reporters in the room, in the photo, which was captured brilliantly by Neil, I think it just in a lot of ways it goes to show you the state of this team. I think there is a lot of sort of frustration amongst the fan base. I think there's a lot of just hurt feelings, and in terms of the media sort of response, it didn't it didn't terribly sort of surprise me, because that's just the state of the franchise right now. We're talking about a team that has now gone 3 seasons without a playoff spot, has played some really poor football this year. I think was bedeviled by not just issues on the field but behind the scenes this year that was played out in some a lot of negative ways. When you think about Federico Bernardeschi's post-match rant in Austin, amongst them. So it's not terribly surprising that only 3 people sort of showed up. That's just the state of the franchise right now. I would suggest that and I sort of did something on TFC Republic today. I think they're fighting for relevance in a lot of ways. I appreciate what Bill, and I asked Bill Manning, specifically, do you think this is a fight for relevance, that the team has to get more relevant? He sort of downplayed that, suggesting that, the fans are still engaged. They're not disinterested. And, the renewal rate amongst season ticket holders, I think he quoted the number at 83%, which is all fair and good. But I mean, I just think that, this club has really slipped down the pecking order in terms of the Toronto sporting market. The media doesn't really care about this team, and we saw that on Friday. And Friday's sort of lack of turnout by the media, it's a reflection on that, and it's a whole reflection on a bunch of other things too. I think it's just the current state of sports media in this country, and soccer always kind of got the short shift, and I think even more so now because of the sort of financial crunch that a lot of media organizations are under. But so it's about that too, and it's about the team not sort of reaching out to non-traditional media as well, whether it be bloggers or social media people or whatnot. And I think it's about, to a certain extent, the club sort of, this is what they wanted, right? They wanted to sort of wait reporters out essentially 3 weeks so that they wouldn't necessarily have to face as many tough questions or scrutiny as they wanted. So it's a combination of all those things. But again, the fact that only 3 of us bothered to show up, I think it in a large way, it just shows you how much the team has really slipped down the pecking order in this city. When you think about where it once stood, I just don't know how you can sort of look at what happened on last Friday and come away with any other sort of conclusion than that.
Yeah, I mean, speaking for just myself personally, I actually didn't even get an invite to the end of season presser.
Wow.
And I guess
Sharman. Sorry, go ahead.
And I guess it's partially just because I'm not no longer affiliated with once again a non-traditional media outlet that covers the team on a daily basis. So maybe that was part of the reasoning. Obviously, down the stretch, I wasn't covering TFC as much because MLS is focusing not on TFC. They're focusing on teams in the playoffs and the playoff hunt. So maybe that was part of the reasoning as well. But I do think that there are other people that also didn't get reached out to. And I don't know if that was intentionally or not, or maybe they just thought they would have enough of, media coverage through traditional media outlets, but that obviously wasn't the case. It was surprising. So I guess my question, you kind of touched on it, John. Do you think the 3 weeks in between the end of the season and obviously the presser, do you think that was intentional by the club? Like, do you think there was a method to, I guess, their madness when they did decide to wait 3 weeks before end of season presser?
Yeah, I think that was definitely part of the calculus, Michael. I mean, I think, as I said, I think there are other issues at play here too, but I do think, to a certain extent, it was about, and maybe what they said in part was, there's some truth to it in terms of, John has only been in charge for one game, and they wanted to give him a little bit more time just to get his sort of head around things. And I have to say, and I don't want to come off as though I'm defending the team here, but I mean, traditionally, they hold these events shortly after the last game of the season, and then it's usually far, after that the sort of roster decisions with regards to who's going to have their contract option picked up and who won't takes place after the the year-end media availability. So the fact that they delayed it and then before that announced those sort of end of contract decisions, there was a bit of an advantage for reporters such as myself because, we got to ask about those decisions, right? I mean, in the past, we never would have had that opportunity because they would have happened after the press event. So I was able to ask about why did they cut ties with Victor Vasquez, and Jason Hernandez gave a very sort of really interesting answer about that, just about the physical demands of the profile of the player that they're looking to play in central midfield. So there was some sort of positive from the media perspective with regards to delaying it. But I don't think it was altruistic on their part. I don't think they said, well, we're going to wait until we make the roster decision so then we can sort of let you guys ask anything. I do think to a large extent, I shouldn't say to a large extent, I think to a certain extent it was about, and I think James Sharman tweeted something about to this effect, about waiting journalists out, right? I mean, not wanting to sort of throw, fresh meat into the ocean, with the blood and everything, and just sort of, because they didn't want to face the scrutiny, right? They don't want to face sort of the throng of tough questions that they undoubtedly would have faced. And, I think Neil and I, and to a lesser extent, Brendan Dunlop, we tried to ask tough questions and try to hold them accountable.
Oh, yeah.
But I do think there are strength in numbers, right? And, it really sort of surprises me that they didn't sort of send an invite to you, Michael. And that's unfortunate because of I appreciate you might not be tied to a main outlet, but, you would put in a lot of time over the last couple of years, and that's really disappointing they didn't reach out to you. But as I said, I do think there's strength in numbers, and then there's more media there that you just sort of get the sense that they would have been more variety of questions and from different people and different perspectives that they would have had to face. And I think that was, as I said, to a certain extent deliberate on their part. They wanted to sort of just wait us out for as long as they could, and it has to say from that perspective that it was pretty successful.
I mean, I wrote to you on the day, and I said I'm in awe. With no one else in the room, you must have caught such so much more eye contact than you wanted to just by being the only face there, right? And then when I watched back the edited clips, everybody was making eye contact with you, whether you would ask the question or not. So it must have been excruciating, absolutely excruciating. Mikey. You said JMO's been to a lot of these. I have a question. Have you missed one ever of these end of season locker cleanouts over the years? You ever missed one?
Since I've been on.
No, JMO.
Oh, JMO.
Oh, sorry. Well, yeah, I would have missed 2019 because, as you'll recall, that was the year I was sort of downsized at Sportsnet.
Right. Of course.
And
Yeah.
that was midway through the season, so I didn't cover that one. I don't believe there was one for 2020 just because of COVID. I'll
Virtual.
stand corrected if there was one. It might have been virtually.
Mhm.
But no, I mean, since that was really the only one I missed, and that was through no fault of my own, really. So
Yeah,
I can
exactly.
tell you, like dating back to 2007, I mean, I don't know what happened in 2019, but like this was the lowest attended, obviously, year-end media availability of all time, to have only 3 people. And really, and this isn't a dig at Brendan because he showed up.
Mhm.
It's just that he showed up a little bit late. I think he missed the first, I want to say 10 or 20 minutes. So he missed Bernardeschi and maybe Insigne, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, they were both under 10 minutes, so that jives.
So I mean, and then he did show up and then he sort of participated, but I mean, it was, like I said, 3 people. I mean,
crickets
It's
and
tough.
tumbleweeds.
It's
Exactly.
tough too, being a reporter in that position. Like sometimes there are pauses and gaps that you're thinking of a question, and
Right.
you know, you just when there's more people in the room, you don't have to be on the spot as much. So you
You're
know,
not
being in that
vamping, yeah.
situation, it
No.
definitely is a little tougher. And another thing I want to like emphasize, like for whatever reason, these weren't streamed either. I'm shocked at the fact that they weren't
I'm
streamed
not
because
shocked.
Are you? I'm
I
not.
am, because the club has done that for the past couple of years. So you
Oh, I know.
couple that with the lack of reporters actually in the room, and it does scream to the point that the team really didn't want as
Want to do
many
this.
eyes on this
Mhm.
event, which I think
They
is
would have been happy to not
disappointing
do
in
it at
its own
all.
right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm surprised they, from what I understand, and maybe Jeffrey can speak to this more than I can. I think
Mhm.
they uploaded video afterwards of all
Yeah.
the.
Yeah. And I immediately defended it.
Okay.
You know, somebody was saying, why can't we see the unedited video? And I honestly did. I made a boo-boo because I took unedited video and I said, well, we never see unedited video. But what the person meant was the live stream, right? Because unedited video is dead
Right.
air and you're staring at an empty seat for 20 minutes while they figure out technical difficulties with this Zoom and that connection kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, I wasn't surprised. Just to tie a bow on it, I was not surprised. They wanted that broadcast, that 5-second delay, so to speak, to insulate themselves, to cut something that ostensibly took out some of the really incendiary stuff that they maybe expected. You know, the whole thesis of this end of season presser is flawed. So to expect it to be delivered warts and all, the 2 poles will never meet. You know.
Yeah. Last question for you guys on this sort of topic, and then we'll get into sort of what was actually said from the players and management that showed up. And this is both for John and Mike. Just from a media perspective, John, you talked about the frustration of fans. You've been on our show. We've talked about this for quite some time now. I wonder if some of that frustration is felt in the media as well, and not missing necessarily because of team play, but in a sense, how maybe the team has gone about providing access to certain players, or think maybe that is true. Maybe that is a narrative I'm making. I wanted to get that because I wonder if that frustration is felt by media and that maybe plays into a little bit of the attendance that we saw at the press conference.
Oh, I'm sure that does. I mean, I don't have a doubt that sort of, and again, I don't want to sort of portray the organization as anti-media and that they've been sort of, actively conspiring against us. But I do think there are some things that they could do a lot better in terms of just the way that they've sort of dealt with us in terms of on a day-to-day basis, in terms of just access, with regards to issues of access. I think it'd be definitely a little bit improved. And I do think, just talking to some reporters, who call it friends of mine, and I don't want to sort of name anyone specific, but they've mentioned that, Michael, that there is some sort of malaise, some sort of pushback about, well, why should we go the extra mile to do this when, essentially we get crapped on. So I do think there is that sort of element of that. Look, I've been frustrated at times this year. I mean, the fact that, and I don't want to, I hate to bring this up only because he's not sort of no longer with the team and he can't really defend himself. But the fact that we went from April essentially until October to hear from Michael Bradley, really unacceptable. I mean, in a lot of different ways. And I get that, he was going through a whole different thing with, the injuries and no doubt dealing with, emotions concerning his father and everything. So I get all that. But every time, and believe me, myself and others, and I'm sure Michael as well, we were pushing to sort of speak to him like regularly throughout sort of that sort of time frame. And there was just a constant sort of pushback, or, well, we'll talk to him and we'll see if he wants to say anything, and there was nothing sort of done. It was really only until, I forget, the Philadelphia game, which would have been late October, where I after I really pushed to talk to him, and was able to get him. And then we got him again for his final press conference, before the season finale. But yeah, I think that there were issues out throughout the entire year that I think sort of certainly led to that. And I'm sure Michael can sort of speak to a lot of the stuff that I went through as well.
Yeah. I guess one of the things that I'll add is it does kind of speak to the state of the team, because in a way, like, their communication seems like they're put in a hard position, because are you really going to feel comfortable rolling out Federico Bernardeschi after his post-game rant at Austin the rest of the season? Really, are you going to feel comfortable with Lorenzo Insigne with everything that's going on, with all the reports about him? Maybe it would have been better for them to come out and address those issues, but then you also have to realize that, do they want to address the issues? Right? It's not like the team has all the say and all the control. And I think that's a big part of this, is that those Italians specifically, they had a lot of the control. They were controlling a lot of their own narrative behind the scenes as well. So yeah, it's a tough spot, but to have the Michael Bradley, to have Lorenzo Insigne, to have Federico Bernardeschi barely speak to media throughout the course of the season, and they're supposed to be referred to as leaders within that dressing room. I think that speaks volumes to the overall state of the team and the club as a whole.
I mean, I'm getting hives here because it's just so adversarial. The expectation that people aren't going to speculate. Like, do you want media attention on the team? Because, like, if we were to judge this in objectivity by just moves alone, it suggests absolutely not. Absolutely not. We want, like, this idea that a front-facing organization has any ability to control their own narrative is such a flawed premise, and we're seeing it manifest like crazy. You don't get the decision. I mean, why are they having board meetings about whether this or that should happen? People are going to spin their wheels regardless. So you put Lorenzo out there, for example, and he says stuff, and people are going to write about it and speculate. You don't put him out there, people are going to write what they want and speculate. You don't put him out there for 6 months, you're opening the floodgates for subscription-based sort of attack journalism. And I'm not pointing fingers at The Athletic, because they do so much more than that. But you're opening the floodgates for this, and these people are getting paid to see this coming over the horizon. And not only does it appear that they're not seeing it, they're actively contributing to their own malaise here, right? Like, everything has causality, and it's so easy to see from where I'm sitting, granted, from where I'm sitting on my soapbox right now, but it's mind-boggling, and it's getting downright adversarial, and I don't like, what I mean? It's like, what, it's starting to feel like a record store, where you go up with your money and you're like, I want this new Pavement LP, like the ultimate record store in the 90s, and the clerk's like, well, you don't even like Pavement, like, can you name their first 3 7-inch singles? And it's like, do you want my money or not? Because at this point, you ain't getting it, and I ain't never coming back here. And it's starting to feel like that exchange. It's like, well, why do you want to talk to Michael? Well, I don't know, because I covered the team, and he's the talisman, and we've heard nothing, and his dad was sacked. It's like, why wouldn't I want to talk to Michael? I mean, everybody and their mother wants to talk to Michael right now. And I'm gonna go to this because I think it's a good segue. Like, and it's part of our burning question. There were so many answers that were not just unsatisfactory in this press conference, but actively insulted my intelligence. Like, I am so sick of hearing the answer, we love our fans, they're so sophisticated, they understand the game so well, etc., squirrel, right? Like, you can't open the dialogue by saying you guys are amazing and smart, and then segue in the same sentence, usually in the same breath, with this absolutely illogical concept that makes no sense. I'm talking about, we didn't do the thing for 3 weeks because Herdman needed more time. How much time does this guy need? Seriously, he's had all the time in the world. We signed him, and then for a month he did nothing until until he coached one game, and he needs more time to assess the roster. Does that actually doesn't fill me with confidence anymore? It makes me feel like the inmates are running the asylum. Do you know what I mean? And it's not a good answer. It's not a satisfactory answer, especially when it's coupled with, you guys are so smart. By the way, we're going to completely gaslight you now. You know, it's getting so tired, and it's hard. It's hard to take it. I mean, it's impossible to take it at face value, but it's hard not to get angry now.
Yeah, I don't know if I necessarily felt the same way. I get where you're coming from for sure. I really do think that in their minds, it was about giving John Herdman time with the roster without having to deal with the press. I also do agree with the point that it's about trying to kind of limit the amount of hard questions they were going to get at this press conference. Because I think if you do it right after the season, I think you have more press show up, and I think you have more hard questions. So I think it's a little bit of both. And getting into the theme of, like, you know, look, what people said at the press conference. I think one of the things that we have been talking about all season, it was a theme, was this idea of connectedness within the team. And I think this also maybe speaks a bit to both in the locker room and maybe a little bit outside the locker room as well, in terms of just how fans have been connecting with the team and things like that. It doesn't feel like everybody right now is connected. And a lot of people said this, right? Almost everybody at some point in their answers said this. So we could clip a million different sort of responses, the same thing. But
that's
Jonathan
cue,
Osorio, it is. Jonathan Osorio did talk a bit about this. So we do have that queued up, and then I want to get some reactions in regards to this. So Jeff, when you got a sec there.
Sean was in here before you and was asked about team chemistry, and he said the team was not as together as it should be. Obviously, chemistry is a hard thing to put your finger on, but can you give us a sense of what the problem was behind the scenes? Was it people who didn't get on together? Was it players who didn't get on with coaches? Can you give us, without revealing what's behind the closed doors, just give us a sense of why there was such turmoil?
Yeah, I appreciate how you worded that question, by the way. But yeah, what I would say is it was a lot of things. It was a lot of factors. I would say in the beginning, the chemistry was there. We were all very optimistic going into the season, really. And then when certain results we let certain results slip, we're getting a lot of draws, and then the injuries come, and then we're not getting results, or the results that we expect to get. Then that's when it becomes difficult. And what I think where we all went wrong was that I think now when the outside starts to question who's trying to find what's the matter, or who's at fault, and so they start trying to get to the bottom of it and point fingers. I think instead of being together, it divided us in that moment, and yeah, we just didn't do a good job of keeping it together, keeping like you said, in a club, in a family, families go through things, but there's some things that have to stay in-house, that have to stay in the family. I understand that you as the media and fans, as fans, they want to know exactly what's going on, but at the same time, we're a working family here, and it's a family. We can't let everything just go out into the public like that, right? And I think that's what these strong families do. They're able to work those things in-house, and I think when we weren't able to do that, that's when it became very difficult. And so I think that's what I can say to that.
I was waiting for one of you to private message me, like, how long is this damn clip? But
no, it's all good.
It's all good. That was the time code you gave.
That was the answer. And I think we wanted the full context of the answer, because there's a lot in there, what Jonathan says, both overtly and not so overtly. But the biggest thing there is this idea that a lot of that information, as you mentioned, Jeff, got out to the public. And I think that kind of festered throughout this season. I think Jonathan Osorio kind of summed that up there. John, obviously that was asked by your colleague Neil Davidson, but what were your sort of impressions on sort of Oso's comment there and sort of this idea and this theme that was going throughout the press conference of connectivity within the team?
Yeah, I and it's something that he sort of hinted at before about, the lack of sort of unity, at the club right now, earlier on in the season. So I wasn't terribly surprised by what he said. And I get his point about, that they look at themselves as a family and that sometimes family have issues, but that doesn't mean everything should be for public consumption. So I get that. And at the same time, he sort of appreciates, where I'm coming from a media perspective, and that, I want to get that information out because it better informs fans. So, I think, I respect where he's coming from, and I think he sort of respects our view as well. So, but it was good that he said that. I think, really not that I'd want to downplay Jonathan's sort of statement, but for me, it was Sean Johnson who really kind of was the eye opener. Like before Oso came out, Johnson came out, and when we saw his name on the schedule, I have to be honest, I was kind of like, oh God, like Sean Johnson, because no disrespect to him, just he was a very tough nut to crack this year in terms of
really.
Michael's grinning because he knows. He doesn't sort of give a lot of way. And so when I saw his name that he was scheduled to speak, I was just like, oh, let's just get this over with because I didn't want to deal with it. But I have to say, he was really, really open and very poignant and very sort of articulate. He's always been articulate. And I asked him point blank because I said, you've been in other locker rooms. You're a veteran of the league. I mean, how do you compare this group to other groups? And I asked him point blank. I said, was this a unified team? And he says, no, this is not a unified group, to be honest. We could have been closer. And ultimately, he took part responsibility of that. And he said there's been discussions since then about, moving on and how do they sort of become a unified team. But the fact that he sort of answered that, unflinchingly honest, he did not hesitate. He said, no, we were not unified at all. That was something I wasn't necessarily expecting from him, but I think it just sort of spoke to, I think the players know that they can't sort of gaslight sort of fans and media anymore, right? They can't sort of like just pretend that everything is all right, that that we're smart to them, fans are smart to them. We know that there were issues behind the scenes. So there was no point in sort of, trying to pull the wool over our eyes or sort of gaslight us anymore. So I really do respect the sort of honesty and the unflinching sort of just perspective that both Jonathan Osorio and Sean Johnson provided on the day.
Yeah. I've got my tinfoil hat. I mean, I don't have one here to put on, but it's interesting that you say that your first flush to Sean Johnson being announced was, oh boy, let's just get it over with, right? They had 3 weeks to prep. Do you not think that they saw in Sean Johnson and that sort of reputation that he's maybe engendered and what's underneath their own eyes, saw it as an opportunity? If this guy goes, and I mean he was out first, this guy can go out, deliver his Sean Johnsonisms, and as long as we've circled our wagons and got the talking points straight, we'll concede that the locker room wasn't together because we can't control that anymore. But that surface level admission is all you're going to get. It wasn't together. I would have liked to see it more. It's obfuscation, unfortunately I'm too cynical now, so I can't help but see it as manufactured because this team is doing backflips to try and avoid the very eventualities that they end up creating for themselves often. So I just don't trust it anymore. And that was fuel for my fire. Your admission.
I did not. I hear you, Jeff. I didn't read it that way. I actually read it as somebody they trust as a leader within the locker room. And generally, I think that's why I think he was the first player out. Was he not, John?
He was.
He was.
Well, no, he was because they had the DPs out first.
Yeah,
right?
he was.
Oh yeah. I forgot about them. Yeah.
But yeah, I know they had the DPs out first. But I think that you bring out Sean Johnson in those moments. Look, you have to bring the DPs out. They are the DPs, so not surprising they go first. But I do think you bring out Sean Johnson in that position kind of as a leader within the locker room. And look, he's been a captain at other clubs. I think he's been a captain at every MLS club he's been at some point in his career, right? Whether it's Chicago or NYCFC, he's eventually ended up being captain. But I wouldn't be shocked if I know a lot of people are pushing for Oso to be captain here, long tenure, hometown guy. I wouldn't be super surprised if Sean Johnson comes out and ends up being captain next season.
Oh,
Ooh, well,
I'd be super surprised if
I'm
he's
not
here
saying
next
it's going to
season.
happen. I'm not saying it's
Let
going
me-
to happen. I just think
let me
that
say
it
this,
might
Mike.
be. Yeah.
If anybody aside from Jonathan Osorio is named captain of Toronto FC next season, they got that ridiculously wrong.
Oh, I'm not saying it's the
Jonathan
right
Osorio
thing. I'm
is
not
the
saying
next
it's the right
captain
thing. I'm just
of
saying I wouldn't be
Toronto FC.
surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if it happened.
I would
This is
be.
the easiest. This is the easiest layup the club has maybe ever gotten. Jonathan Osorio is the next captain of Toronto FC. If they blow that layup, I'll be jaw dropped.
Would you?
There's no
considering what
draw
the club has been
left for
doing
drop
lately-
on my end. Yeah.
Sorry,
Guys,
what'd you say,
they're
Mike?
gonna make Raul Petretta captain, and it's that's what's
Well, I'm
happening.
just, well, I'm just saying, like, considering some of the decisions the club has made over the last couple of seasons, would you actually be that shocked that they blew that layup?
You know what? The one thing I'll say about the club is they've always treated Jonathan Osorio well here in Toronto. So I think they understand his significance.
Then there's
I think
still
they
time
do
to mess it up.
understand his value. And I think they've seen the way that it's played out with some of the other legends here at the club. I do not think they want to mess up Jonathan Osorio's relationship
right.
and legacy here.
I hope you're right. I will just say
and Michael, I take your point about how you wouldn't be surprised if it was Sean Johnson, although I think everyone understands it's going to be Osorio. I get what you're saying, and I agree. I do think there is something there about his sort of leadership and just the way he carries himself. I think TFC could certainly benefit from having someone out like that out front. So I completely get what you're saying. And maybe if not for the fact that Osorio was on the team, that he probably would be the next captain. But I agree with Mr. Singh. I just don't see how, naming anyone than Osorio, I think would be just a spectacularly, example of them tripping over themselves unnecessarily.
no.
Yeah,
Bill Manning's lacing up the boots. He's the new captain. Yeah.
Yeah, no, Sean Johnson's a terrific voice in the locker, and that speaks to like the fact that you're even putting that out there does speak to just how important of a leader and how good of a leader Sean Johnson is. I mean, like John said, if Ozo wasn't on the team, I would have no issue with him being the next captain of Toronto FC. But the
On
fact is
1
that-
year left of his deal and
I think
essentially
for-
halfway out the
yeah,
door.
yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah,
he's
fair enough.
a fantastic leader.
Yeah, no, I agree. And like I said, he's been a captain everywhere. Like he came from NYCFC as captain of that club.
You know who else has
So-
been a captain everywhere?
Yeah.
Yeah, true.
But let's not.
Voldemort.
Not yet.
Mhm.
Not yet.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. We have another clip here. John Herdman talked a little bit. We talked about a lot of things, obviously, in his first 41 days by the time we did that press
Mhm.
conference.
Needs more time to suss it all
Well,
out.
he's going to get he's going to get a bit more time. But he talked a little bit about the needs of the club, what he thinks the club needs going into 2024 and going into this offseason. So let's play that clip and talk about that.
Sure.
When you triage the situation in terms of the roster specifically, what do you see as the biggest need this offseason?
I'm going to say that the first thing is it's difficult to judge this group of men given the context. And you could say they created the context because of lack of quality. I've seen players shift in a 20-day period. There's been an absolute shift in some individuals. Players that were low on confidence, they're feeling more like themselves, and we're evolving. The tactical blueprint is evolving some players in positions they've not been asked to play before, and we're seeing, maybe a player who was a centre back in a back four and playing as it's a 2 centre back system and a 3 centre back system. They look different, very different. Some of the principles we've asked, which is a lower intensity build-up player, gives more think time to players that may have had to play a higher intensity game in terms of their attacking build-up style. So you see things differently there, and And then with the wing backs, it's been really interesting. Been really impressed with Jaquil Marshall-Ruddy. Really impressed with how he's handled this period of time. And in the wing back profile, shown that he can cross with his left foot, and his left foot is absolutely at that next level from what we've seen. And he's stayed behind every training with Alex Dodson, the positional coach, working on that wing back role. So he'd be a prime example of, maybe a player that was playing under capacity, and you would say, that wing back position would be a big area we'd have to invest in. We're seeing a shift.
Nope.
As I mute myself, John Herdman talking about the needs of Toronto FC next season, and the emphasis was on wingbacks there, but obviously, Jeff, you might be getting your wish to 3-5-2 or some variation of it. Looks like it's coming back next season for TFC, and interesting because the last couple of weeks we've talked about Jaquil Marshall-Ruddy. Where does he fit within this club? What is his best role? Exactly. And
I was screaming
right
for
there,
it.
yeah, and there you go. John Herdman talked about him as a wing back, both on the left and on the right side. Again, guys, just to get your thoughts just in terms of, okay, we clearly will have a tactical identity. We clearly are going to play 3-5-2 or some version of it. Ideally, what do you think this club needs to invest in terms of positions in the offseason, whether it be through free agency, through the draft, other means to get a hold of the players that they need?
I'll say, I think just to reiterate kind of what John Herdman was saying is that we have been so stuck and so accustomed to seeing Toronto FC play in a 4-3-3. And there are times where certain players don't really fit that formation. So when you shift it to a 3-5-2 or a 3-4-3, whatever variation you want to say moving forward, then there are times where players can suddenly look a lot better. For example, just off the top of my head, this is just me spitballing. This may not be the case because of his price tag, but a guy like Raul Petretta, I think we can all agree he didn't really reach his potential last season. He was obviously playing for the most part at left back in a 4-3-3. What if he were to play as a left-sided center back? What if we was going to have that Kamal Miller kind of revelation where he goes from a fullback to more of a center back in a back three, one of those outside center backs? Is that something where now all of a sudden, hey, this guy looks like he could be a potential player? So before we can really dive in and answer, kind of that question, because the reality of the question is all of the above. They literally, when you look at their roster and you look at the quality of players on their roster, they need to upgrade every position except for maybe goalkeeper. But even so, you can question, could they get a better backup goalkeeper than Luka Gabrin? Maybe they want to just invest in him, given that opportunity. But I think all around they need upgrades everywhere. Again, the obvious one is probably striker, because they haven't really had a striker, but maybe a 2-striker system. All of a sudden you see Cassius Mayula and Prince Owosu, or you see Federico Bernardeschi potentially slide up there and play in that, in a 3-5-2, and all of a sudden they click. So there could be players that are on this roster that I think may remain on this roster despite not having the best season last season.
They have to. I mean, that's a foregone conclusion. Guys, I think, we need to keep JMR at this club for the specific reason that every coach that comes in, and there's been a lot of them in the last little while, can come to the realization that he may be good as a wingback. I think that's a tradition we need to keep for as long as possible, because how many times have we heard that from an incoming coach?
Well,
he seems
wingback
to be
was different than fullback, because he played as a fullback. He never really played as a wingback, so that comes with.
I mangled the joke, but it was funny in my head.
Well, I mean, look, it just means he'll have a little less defensive responsibility at times. But it was interesting because the reason I asked the question the way I asked it was because, and again, we didn't play the clip because we could play like a clip. We could just play whole interviews and get answers. But Jason Hernandez also spoke about the realities of the existing contracts that will be on the books for 2024. And the fact that although, yes, do we need upgrades at almost every position? Yes. Can we realistically do that with the position that we're in with the contracts? Might be tougher, right? Because a lot of those guys, again, are under contract, but also, if you want to move off from some of these guys, you're going to have to find dance partners somewhere, whether it's in the league or outside of the league. And how many of these guys really have value to somebody, right? So there might be a situation where you're dancing with a lot of the same dance partners you had this season and trying to see if they can fit in this new formation. I wonder, John, if you sort of got the same kind of vibe from John Herdman and from Jason Hernandez in their comments.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you look at it, I mean, there are 21 players, 21 on a last place team who scored 26 goals, I think, gave up 59 this year. 21 guys who are contractually obligated, guaranteed for next year. And it could be 23 if Kosi Thompson comes back from loan and Ame Mabika renegotiated his deal. So, and just to put that number in perspective, MLS roster limits are 30 players. So 23 guys on a last place team who are, essentially
coming back.
That's a lot of heavy lifting to do off of one off season. You got to move a lot of those contracts off, and you only can buy out one player and get the associated salary cap relief. You can move players on trade or transfers or loan deals, but I think it's going to be really difficult just because of the state of the club. I mean, how willing are MLS clubs want to pick off guys from Toronto? I suspect that there's going to be trades and loans and other deals here where TFC is going to have to eat some of that contract, like be responsible for a portion of their salary, much like with Jesus Jimenez as part of the Brandon Servania deal earlier this year. But it's tough. I mean, they, like, as you said, they've got, like, I think, upgrade pretty much everywhere, and they don't really have the flexibility to do it. I mean, 9 attacking players under contract essentially next year. 9 for a team that scored 26 goals. That's just poor roster construction, in my view. I mean, to go that heavy with that sort of number of players. And I don't think enough people are talking about, the major upgrades that they need at the center back position. I mean, I think Ame Mabika had a strong start to his career at TFC, but then quickly fell off a cliff.
Yep.
Not convinced that Shane O'Neill can come anywhere close to what he once was. Matt Hedges sort of got out of town pretty quickly, just as soon as he came.
Roasted.
Sigurd roasted. I think there were flashes, but I mean, I think there was gross inconsistency throughout the year. They have to go out and they have to find their next Drew Moore. And I think really they have to find 2 of them. Yeah, I don't think one will do. I think they really have to go out and get two Drew Moores to sort of 2 defensive quarterbacks who can really kind of guide this team forward. And that's a big ask. It's a very big ask for a team position that TFC is.
Huge ask.
So I'm not sure that I'm sure Jason has, said all the right things and he's going to sort of work all the levers and try to move guys on. But, I think we might be having sort of discussions next summer about, still talking about the need for them to move players on, because I don't think you can get it all done in one sort of off season.
No.
I think you hit on something really important there. And it's the fact that TFC players don't have much value right now when you're trying to move on from some of these contracts. So some people might think, just sell. I'm just going to throw a name out there that I'm not saying this person deserves to be sold or not, but let's say just sell Sigurd Rosted. You got to find a dance partner.
Do you want to buy him?
To sell Sigurd Rosted.
Yeah.
Sell Lorenzo Insigne. Oh, you got to find someone that's going to be willing to pick up the tab for Lorenzo Insigne. Like this is how it works.
And
right
be
now.
willing to get washed because it's a bad deal and you're going to lose money if you're TFC.
And even within MLS, you got to, if you want to trade a player within MLS, you got to find someone that's going to be willing to give up something to get that player, or even just take on that player without, maybe they have to attach some GAM to get rid of a contract. But this is the reality that they're stuck in. And just poor overall roster construction up to this point. I think there's way too many guaranteed contracts. It seemed like the team really thought, and of course they're preparing for 2026 because that's how the DP contracts are structured. So they're trying to build and establish a core around that, but that core imploded and did not work. So Jason Hernandez, I mean, credit to him. He has found ways to be creative so far. You think of Matt Hedges, you think of Io Akinola, deals that maybe some people thought wouldn't be able to get done, but Mark Anthony Kaye managed to get deals done. So Jason Hernandez is going to have to be really creative this offseason if he wants to create further flexibility. They do have cap space. They do have a decent amount of cap space from my understanding, but yeah, it won't be a complete overhaul of the roster like we've seen, I think, the past 2 seasons, in my opinion.
No.
Sorry, but if I just want to sort of follow up on what Michael said, like, I don't want to portray that I have complete faith in Jason Hernandez, because I do have questions there, but he is a bright guy. And I know he'll get a lot of flack because he was working under Bob and he was his assistant GM, and people sort of question, where his responsibility is in all this. But he's been around the league a long time. He really is kind of like a student of the CBA and all the levers and everything. And anytime I kind of consider myself a bit of a CBA or MLS rules wonk myself, but there are times I get tripped up, and I'll ask him, and it's just like he knows the answer off the top of his head. So he knows the ins and outs of it. So I think, he will absolutely knows which levers to push, and he can kind of get creative. I think it's just a matter of, as I've said, and as Michael said, I'm not sure that a lot of these TFC players have value to other teams, whether it's in MLS or outside of the league. So he's going to have to he's got his work really cut out for himself.
And I'd add Sean Rubio into that too.
Yeah,
absolutely.
In terms of someone who's really savvy when it comes to MLS rules and mechanisms.
Yeah, and
but there's only so much lipstick you can put on a pig.
Well,
you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I was going to kind of get to that, because a lot of fans in the comments are like, hey, send your young players to CPL teams and things like that. Like, if you're trying to loan these guys to CPL teams, you're probably eating the entire contract. Like, you are paying the majority of their contract, because most of the CPL clubs on a weekly basis are not going to be able to handle those wages, right? So, I mean, great. Okay, you move the player off, but do you get any cap relief for that? Like, there's going to be a lot of considerations here in terms of how you're moving players on and how much flexibility you're going to create. And we didn't clip it, but one of the things they're going to have to figure out is Jonathan Osorio going to be a DP next year, right? Like, he's technically a DP right now. Can you find levers to get him off DP? And you're going to have to use a lot of TAM to buy him down. Is that the most effective thing to be doing right now? So there's a lot of sort of tactical questions that this club's going to have to kind of figure out with, bringing in players, sending players out the door before we see the final roster construction. But a lot of the players that we've kind of been pointing some fingers at, or at least asking some questions about, are going to be back next year. And this leads into sort of the final clip that we have. And the question that a lot of you have been asking in the comments here, I've been sort of keeping an eye on what you've been saying live, but are the DPs coming back? Right. That's, I think,
kudos. Yeah.
Yeah. That's what
I love the way JMO asked this question. It's fantastic.
So we'll play the clip and then we'll go. So this is of Lorenzo Insigne talking about his desire to be here.
Do you want to be here? Do you want to be part of the solution going forward? Because there's been sort of links to you, reports of you wanting to go back to Italy. Do you want to be here? Do you want to be part of TFC and helping this team get back on track?
Io non ho mai detto di voler andare via da Toronto, non lo dirò mai, perché qua sto bene, la mia famiglia sta bene, i miei figli stanno bene e siamo contenti di stare qua. Ora ti ripeto, è finita una stagione molto deludente per me, ma da parte di tutta la squadra, e dispiace per la società e i tifosi che fino all'ultima partita ci hanno incitato. Questo dispiace molto, però ti ripeto, io sto benissimo qua e tornerò a casa in vacanza dalla famiglia per ricaricarmi e tornare qua al 100% e recuperare il terreno perduto di quest'anno.
I never said that I wanted to leave. I would never say that. I'm extremely happy here. My family's also happy here. It was a tough season. It was a tough season for the club and for the fans, especially for the fans who cheered us on right to the end. I'm going on vacation now. I'm going home to spend time with my family. I'm going to get my energy, my strength back, and I'm going to come back even stronger.
All right, so that is Lorenzo Insigne talking about, his desire to stay. And to be fair to him, and to be fair to everything he said publicly, he's never said he wanted to leave, right? That is something that we have put out there, obviously, as fans. But John, you asked that question. And first, How much English do you think he understands? Like, I think he understood.
I think he understood you
I
completely.
think he understood
if you
your
look
question.
at his,
He still uses the translator, but I think he understood your question. But in terms of your sense of that, his answer, what were your thoughts?
It was about what I expected. I mean, I wasn't sort of expecting him to come out and say, "Yeah, I hate it here, and I don't want to leave." But I did want to sort of get him on the record as to to see what he would say. Look, he's in a, he's in a difficult. I shouldn't say he's in a difficult. I think
I was gonna light your feet under coals for. Oh yeah, so difficult. My God, I want that difficult situation.
I'll correct myself. The club is in a very difficult position here. They've signed him to this, cost prohibitive contract. They're tied to him long term, and moving him on, as Michael said earlier, it's not straightforward. You can say, "Oh, well, sell him back to Napoli, sell him to some club in Serie A." You need a dance partner, and you need. I mean, who is going to pick him up at those wages? No one in Italy is going to pay him $15 million US a year. No one. He's going to have to take a substantial pay cut. Will he want to sort of, leave money on the table to go back to Italy? Maybe. I mean, I don't know. But if it were me, I mean, throwing away whatever, say he was taking a pay cut from $15 to $6 million, that's not an insignificant amount of money, even to a multimillionaire like Lorenzo Insigne. So I think it's just going to be difficult to get these, whether it's Bernardeschi or Insigne, to move them on. I think the other thing I'll say is this issue about, no, I never said I wanted to leave. Yeah, fine. He's never said that publicly. But, everything that I've been told by report or by sources is that, him and Fede were actively trying to push Bob Bradley out the door pretty much from day one, that they were sort of working to sort of undermine his authority. Ultimately, it worked. I think they wield a great deal of power because of their DP status. And so, that's the situation that TFC finds themselves in, is that they're essentially stuck with these guys. And unless they can sort of come good, which is a big if considering what we saw last year, I think they're going to be here for, I think, it might just be more of the same. And we might, the team might be stuck with them for the time being.
I think what the narrative that's trying to be sold, whether it be by the Italians or by the team, is that all of a sudden they've become humbled because they've gone through this losing season and they've come to this realization that, we are part of the problem. So now, here we go. We're all in now. Let's try and get this right. And in my opinion, I don't believe you. I don't believe
not even a little tiny bit. Not even like a smidgen of a smidgen of a smidgen of a decimal point.
Okay. Maybe not as far as Jeff, but yes, I don't believe them until, and I think this is the way the fan base feels as well, until they go out and prove it.
Exactly.
Right? I don't
Was
think
that the face of a man that wants to be here? I mean, we all watched that clip. That guy looked like he wanted to be just about anywhere else. Like, I mean, at least try.
Yeah.
Maybe not on the pitch, but at least try. He's talking about he's saying, I'm going to go on vacation. It's the last thing I want to hear from Lorenzo Insigne is how he's about to go on holiday and recharge himself. Like, nobody cares. And this, I just, it's so depressing.
All right.
I mean, that's the best they can do.
I have a question for John.
Yeah.
Because it seems like the team is trending this way, maybe because they have no other option, maybe because there's other factors at play, but it seems like the team is trending towards keeping both designated players. Do you think Toronto FC can be a winning team with both designated players next season?
With both of them as designated players?
Yes.
I think it's difficult, Michael. I mean, we haven't seen anything from them remotely that would suggest that they can. If they can sort of, I think it really depends largely on the supporting cast in terms of who they bring in next year, and if they can sort of restructure the roster. If they can get a number 9 who can kind of be on their level and sort of be on the same telepathy path of them, if they can sort of solidify the defense, And if from what John Herdman was hinting at, if they can kind of get more sort of service from the wingback positions in those wide areas, then sure, that's a possibility. I'm not going to rule it out entirely, but just going based on what we've seen from them during their time in MLS, no, not at all. No, I mean, 10 goals and 10 assists, between them. You need your DPs to be impact players in this league, and they haven't come close to providing impact or value for their contracts. Not even their salary cap hits, for that matter, which is modest at 650,000 and change. So, as I said, I haven't seen anything from them that suggests that they can just sort of turn it on next year and really come good. The club is making a lot of bold promises about, well, they've seen the light and they've fully bought in. Okay, fine, show us then. I mean, that's what it really boils down to at this point. Enough talk. You have to show us.
No, I agree.
They've seen the light, and Lorenzo looked like he would, rather be lit on fire at the press conference where he's supposed to get us all on board with this new light. And Berna was like, I have no regrets over setting the entire culture on fire. I mean, this was the best they can do. We waited 3 weeks for these hot nuggets of tasty information. They had 3 weeks to get their S together and practice this.
Lorenzo
and
did
this
say
is
he's
what
going to
we
give
got.
300%, Jeff.
300%.
What's quick math? What's 300% of zero? Oh, it's still zero? Oh, okay. All
well,
right.
look, I mean, look, okay, all the superlatives were said. I was, I wasn't surprised with, and it wasn't just Lorenzo and Fede, but like obviously Jason Hernandez touched on this. So Sean Johnson touched on this. Just, Bill Manning touched on this idea that John Herdman in 41 days has come in and blown this incredible breath of fresh air, and everybody's on board and everybody's bought in. Of course, everybody's bought in. A lot of people are fighting for their jobs. A lot of people are fighting to keep their nice paychecks. So they're gonna go and they're gonna play really hard in training and stuff like that. Again, like you said, John, proof's in the pudding once the games start playing. Right. That's when you're really gonna start to know. Go ahead, Jeff.
Well, it's such empty words, right? This is why I'm starting to get pretty wary of Herdman, because he's very good at empty words. Like their confidence is coming back. Yeah, they're not playing competitive games anymore. My confidence would come back if I had to go to training and eat at the commissary as opposed to preparing for games. They're not the same thing. And presenting them as if they are. Yeah, if your confidence comes back inside a losing season, that has merit. If your confidence comes back because you get to, order pizza again, I could give an S. And don't present it to me as they're the same thing, which is what's starting to happen. I don't care. And I refuse to be gaslighted. I refuse to have my intelligence insulted by this club anymore after this season. So I'm going to call it the way I see it. Devil may care at this point. That was such a nothing burger. That entire press conference was such an unbelievable nothing burger. And it wasn't, because like all of them, we are able to glean off what we saw. We were able to glean our own conclusions off body language and things like that.
The one thing I'll disagree with you, Jeff, is I think Jason Hernandez and John Herdman, they were pretty transparent in the way that they were talking. Like, I don't know if transparent is the right word. They were
open. They were pretty open.
They were open. They broke it down in a way that I think sometimes we can't see behind the curtain, but they gave you a little bit of a peek behind the curtain, in a way that helped you understand, particularly, Jason Hernandez, when he's talking about the salary cap issues that the team is dealing with. Like, just so fans we can get a better understanding of kind of what they're working with. So there was still some meat there. And I also hate to admit, man, John Herdman, he got me, man. He's such a good persuader and such a good communicator that, like, all right, I'm starting to kind of buy what you're kind of selling here. He does such a good job at that. So I understand why.
That's what I'm worried about. Yeah.
He's been able to kind of persuade and get on board. And, it wasn't just, John Herdman. It was also Ozo talking about some of John Herdman's methods, about, using visuals and setting goals. And then, as Ozo kind of said what I just said about how good of a persuader John Herdman is, and he really makes you believe, maybe, yeah, sure, that could be a crux, but at the same time, it could also be maybe that's the magic that gets this team going and gets this team going in the right direction. I don't know, John. Do you feel the same way?
Yeah, I take your point, Michael, and it was my colleague Neil Davidson who was after John Herdman said something to that effect in the press conference. He said, "Well, I guess the point is now you guys have to show us, right? Like it's one thing to sort of like say that, and it's one thing to sort of say you're going to go out and do this, and that the things have changed, and everyone's on board. But at the end of the day, you have to sort of the proof is in the pudding. So I'm not going to sort of throw them under the tape or under the bus for anything they said in terms of things turning around. What I would say is that it's far too early to sort of suggest that that's even coming close to happening. And I'll reserve judgment until next year, because that's ultimately is what we're talking about, right? I mean, what are we talking about now? About some sort of press conference in November? It doesn't matter. Like it matters when the season kicks off and whether they can sustain that. That is ultimately going to be the
Yeah, we're sickos. We're sickos for doing an hour plus or show on a press conference in November.
You know what? TFC Live needs something. They need some kind of glimmer of hope, some kind of ray of sunshine, something. I don't know if we provided it today.
No, I'm here to light on fire and burn it all on fire. I'm just worried that we need to see results on the pitch, and we hired people that are really good at talking. And I want to see it expressed on the pitch, not expressed in empty words. Because these words are getting emptier by the second.
Fair. I will say this: we kind of said this when he took over the women's team, and look what he did with the women's team.
Absolutely.
Kind of said the same thing when he took over the men's team, and look what he did there. So I 100%. I have my skepticism shades are all the way up
for day one
for sure. But I will. It is hard for me to bet against John Herdman because he has delivered twice. In a context that we all understand. So
and
again, we'll see it.
The other thing, Mike, is there's so much riding on this position for John Herdman that I really feel like he's going to do everything in his power to make sure that not only does the team do well, but like he doesn't look bad himself. His career trajectory, a lot of it, I think, is riding on this appointment here at Toronto with the resources that are deployed and this being his first club level job. There's a lot at stake for John Herdman. So I think he's a guy with high standards, and he's going to do everything in his power to ensure that those standards are reached, even if it doesn't align with Bill Manning, even if it doesn't align with Jason Hernandez. I think Herdman's a person who's not going to be afraid to speak out if something's not right.
What I'll
go ahead,
John.
So sorry, Mike. Michael raises an interesting point, and what I wanted to add to that is that you're right, Michael. At the same time, he's left at disadvantageous times for both the men's and the women's teams, right? I know, I appreciate it was after 5 years of service or whatever, so absolutely. But he moved on to the men's team, and he left the women's team at a bad time for them because it was whatever it was. I think the one of the
out from Brazil.
I think it was Brazil or I can't remember what it was, but the World Cup was coming, or Olympics World Cup was coming up.
Oh, no, it was the World Cup. Sorry, it was the run up to the 2019 World Cup. Yeah,
France. The men's team, leaving them at a time where there's a massive labor strife. There's the whole situation with the CSA. So he is someone who moves on when he finds that the grass is greener on the other side of the hill. I can't help but wonder, especially if things go rough at TFC, and just considering the way he sort of, he was the one to a large extent navigated this move from the men's national team to TFC, reaching out to Bill Manning indirectly. I just can't help but wonder if the going gets tough, will he sort of start looking for exit options? Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
I don't think it's terribly unreasonable to answer those questions, to ask those questions. But I think you're quite right, Michael. He does have a lot at stake here in terms of his own personal sort of reputation, right? So it's an interesting dichotomy, so to speak, to see how this plays out.
Yeah. And last thing on the conference before we get into the burning question here and sort of wrap up the show, John, we didn't clip it, but I wanted to ask you about your question to Bill Manning, specifically about kind of selling himself as to why he should still be the president of Toronto FC. I know you wanted to elicit that reaction out of him and sort of talk to him about that based on sort of fan reaction. But overall, what sense did you get from Bill? Because it felt like a lot of him being like, well, I've learned from other sports teams and I've kind of, talking more about the business, which is, of course, part of his portfolio and a main part of his portfolio at TFC. And you talked a little bit earlier about, him referencing renewal ticket numbers and things like that. That's my world. I live in that world. So I understand it. But what did you get from Bill in terms of his answer to your question about, why he still thinks he should be president of TFC?
Very little, if I'm being perfectly honest. It's a question that I've asked of him before. I can remember, I think it was it would have been when Bob Bradley was let go and they made the change to Jason Hernandez. And I think I asked him essentially two questions that way about, why should you be, make the case for yourself? Why should you be president? And I think the follow-up was, can you understand why there's so much frustration out there amongst the fan base as to why, people want to change? I asked it a little bit differently this time around. And I should say, when he's answered that in the past, it's always been, well, I have experience. I've been a winner. I mean, when I was at Real Salt Lake, you look at my first sort of few years here, we had great success. And he's always sort of leaned on that sort of track record that he's had. He didn't do that so much this time. It was more about, I've learned, I'm a student of sports. I can, learn from other industries and everything. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's probably a question better asked of a TFC fan, Michael. But if I heard that response, I don't think that would inspire me with a whole hell of a lot of confidence in terms of, why he should stay on. Because I do think there is a small but pretty vocal minority of people who think that they should move on that the club should move on from Bill Manning. I don't think that's going to happen. I just want to go on the record. I think just the club he's got another year tied to his deal. The fact that he's the Argos president, I think, complicates things a great deal. So for all those people with pitchforks baying for his blood, I think you're going to be disappointed. I don't think he's going anywhere unless he sort of steps down and gets another opportunity. But again, if I'm a fan and I was listening to his response to my question, I don't know that I would be all that thrilled with what I heard, because it just seemed a lot of, I don't know, nonsense.
Obfuscation.
Yeah,
squirrel.
Yeah, look, I agree. Like I don't know. Again, it's also part of it is like, what else is he going to say to that question? You could look at it that way, but I also
don't tell us about season ticket numbers and give us an Excel spreadsheet on merch sales.
He was asked by Neil, but I think. Look, I think he's had a rough couple of years, and there has been reporting done by yourself and by others talking about people within the organization not always happy that he's had a lot of the decision-making powers over certain signings and things like that. Again, I guess this is a wait and see scenario. Again, we are talking about a press conference in November and the games get played starting in April, but or late March. But I think this is as much as this is a critical time for John Herdman, I think it's just a critical time for John Herdman. For Bill Manning. I know, got that run the wrong way. But you know what I mean. From the sense that he's now on coach 3, 4, really, if you want to count the interims, right? Like
5.
5. Yeah, 5. Right. And I mean, you can sort of say Greg Vanney to a certain extent, but he didn't really bring Vanney in. That wasn't his necessarily hire. But, he's on coach 5. Not a lot of presidents in football clubs around the world, let alone in MLS, get 5 coaches. From
what DP is he on?
He will be
4 zillion.
Well, yeah. If you're thinking it's Sateldo. So you're on DP 4 or 5.
And is third GM, second GM? I mean, so it has to be said, and I don't want to sound like I'm picking on Bill, but when you look at the last several major decisions that he's made, they haven't gone swimmingly well. There was the appointment of Ali Curtis, who hired Chris Armas, whether it was bringing in Bob Bradley, and I think Bob probably deserved a little bit more time. I know that's an opinion that a lot of people don't share, but I do think he could have got a bit more time. But I mean, the big one, obviously, bringing in the Italians, because that was largely driven by Bill, and to sort of overspend to that extent on players who it doesn't seem like they did a great deal of research on it and due diligence. I think that's, that could be the one that really sort of blows up in his face in the long term.
Yep.
Fair enough.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah, I don't have much to add.
Fair enough. All right, guys. Let's wrap this thing up. It's running a bit long, but I think there was a lot to say there. Let's bring
and
in,
we had to push our over under, so you're gonna have to suffer
Yeah.
through that special opening again. Let's do it. Here comes the burning question. Stay.
All right, the burning question presented by Nextdoor. Nextdoor is the official community app of Toronto FC. It's also where you connect with the people and local businesses in your neighborhood. Download Nextdoor to find the soccer fans in your neighborhood, like on the Toronto FC fan community. We've been posting there, interacting with people. For those who've already joined, thank you so much for doing that. You can download Nextdoor at the App Store or on nextdoor.ca and join the group. And we posted there, and of course we posted on our Twitter feed. I will never call it X. Are you buying what TFC are selling after the end of season press conference? And a lot of you, it's no. But there are some interesting answers, so I will read out a few here. So Chris just coming in, nope, not buying it. A GM with no experience. I think, John, you spoke to that a little bit. Maybe not GM experience, but a lot of experience within the league. A head coach with no club experience, 2 overpaid DPs that want out, and a president who gets every decision wrong. The club is rotten.
And a partridge in a pear tree. Sorry.
Hey, it's that time of year. Greg writes in, I'm willing to accept that no changes needed. I'm willing to accept that attitudes have improved, but TFC have been mentally fragile for the last couple of years. If they don't get off to a decent start next year, it may fail. Time will tell. And then John just here at the end says, talk is cheap, and I'll believe we've turned the corner when I see it. But the setup of having a technical director, a general manager, and a head coach all working together using very modern analytics seems more congruent with modern, successful MLS teams than anything we've had in the past 5
since Aaron Winter. I like how you corrected that quote. Yeah. Starting to feel a bit 2012 over here.
Yeah, but I think the overall, in just even going through some of the comments here tonight, is we talked about the frustration. We all know it's there. I think now the question is, what is the path forward, and how does that? Are you confident in the people that are going to be making those decisions in the path forward? And yes, a press conference in November isn't going to answer every single question, but it does give fans an insight and a light into where this club is going. And I feel like in some ways there is still a lot of apprehension out there about where this club goes in 2024 and beyond. Maybe some hope in sort of the triangle of technical director, GM, and head coach. But generally speaking, right now, there's a lot of, I'm not sure I'm buying where this club is sort of trying to get to in 2024. I don't know if you guys feel the same way, but that's sort of the vibe and the sentiment I'm getting back.
I think you're quite right, Michael. And it's not to belabor the point, because I brought it up before during this sort of show, but it's very much at a case of, okay, yeah, show us then. That's really what it's come down to. I mean, I think just people are sort of frustrated with sort of all the talk, and it's been 3 dismal seasons. Let's not sort of sugarcoat it. These have been 3 really bad years, and take it from someone who's covered the team since day one and who can remember 2012 and how nightmarish that was. I can tell you this season was worse. So this is it is a long way back for the club. Like, let's not sort of downplay that. So there is work to do, and it's great that they're sort of full of optimism, but at the end of the day, they have to go out and prove themselves. And as I stated earlier, just with their contractual sort of situation, it's a heavy lift. It's a heavy lift to get it done in 1 transfer window, let alone 2. So I'll be really interested to see. I'm not sort of saying that people should give up hope, just that be reasonable with your expectations is what I would say.
John, let me ask you, do you think the club is selling that they're going to be a competitive team next year? Do you think that's the message that they were portraying, or do you getting that feeling whatsoever that they thought they they could be competitive next season?
I didn't get that. I didn't myself personally, Michael. I didn't get
Yeah.
that from that sort of conference call or from that press conference. I think it was just a matter of let's focus on sort of restructuring things. Let's sort of building a clear team identity, a distinct style of play, and that this is going to be sort of a long process. There was nothing in terms of, not that they were going to come out and sort of guarantee that they were going to make the playoffs or anything like that, but there wasn't anything remotely said about, well, we're going to be competitive again, as far as I can remember. So I didn't get that feeling. I think that there is a sense of they're under promising to a certain extent, that they're just going to focus on and they have to get things right on the pitch. And I guess that would be the major takeaway that I took from hearing Bill and John and Jason speak on last Friday.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I don't know. I couldn't really tell if they're selling that, if they're selling that they're going to be rebuilding. I couldn't really get a sense of
what a successful press conference,
where they believe they're going to be next season. And maybe that's a good thing. Maybe that's a good thing, as John said. Like, maybe they have to undersell, because the reality is it could take a long time for this team to turn itself around, right?
You asked, where they, do they know where they're going to be next year? I don't think they know. Like, I just think there's just too many questions that they can't reasonably or possibly answer that at this point. So I think that's why they sort of didn't go that route in terms of, yes, this is who we are. This is what we're going to do. This is what you can expect. No one in their position could reasonably, with a straight face, guarantee all those things.
Yeah. Is there a world out there? I'll ask this to any of you guys. Is there a world out there where you see Toronto FC being competitive next season? Do you think that is actually attainable? Depending on some of the moves that they make this offseason?
I think it's possible. It's MLS,
that's the only takeaway. It's MLS.
So things happen.
But still no.
Yeah.
So give me like
teams,
a percentage. Like, what's like a percentage of chance that you think that Toronto FC could be competitive next season? Because I think heading into, I'm just looking at,
are we all going to make the same face?
I think heading into last offseason, I think the percentage probably would have been, and this is just me speaking for myself, I would have said it would have been like an 80-90% chance that they were going
easily.
To
have you seen our over-unders? Oh my god.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's also because of the core that they had in place. They got back Richie Lorea, the Italians here for the full off season. They had such a good stint and when they were on the field, and then it went wrong. Now I feel like it's the I feel like it's like a 20% chance.
We're gonna win MLS Cup. We're gonna win the quadruple this time.
Our over-unders are any indication of what we know. So
you mean the keychain version of the MLS Cup that they sell at MLS Cup finals? Yeah, we could win that.
Maybe. No, I mean the Philip J. Schultz Trophy, man. We're winning. We're winning our second star. This
yeah,
year.
I think I'm with you, Mike. I think you're like in the 20% range, and that's like
0.0020% range.
Yeah, I think it's optimistic.
20% range.
But this is MLS. This is, like I was about to say, like, this is a league where championship teams can be stripped apart really quickly because of the way salary caps and rules work.
Not in Toronto.
FC Cincinnati could win a Shield, maybe even win a double this year, and then completely have to strip their team. Right? It's possible, but I mean, a lot of things would have to go right in the offseason. Like, a lot of things would have to go right. And I think I don't know, to answer your question earlier, you were asking John, but I don't know if you can win with both DPs on the field, especially if you're going to do a 3-5.
Where
do they play? Where do they play? Right? Like, I guess the question is, does one play as a striker?
Or you could play 3-4-3. Like, it's not dead set 3-5-2, right? It could be a 3-4-3. So you're still playing with wing backs and wingers. I think we've seen Canada do that in the past as well. So it is a possibility they still play wing. But yeah, man, this is an off season. You're right. There's going to be so many important decisions that are going to have to be made that could define the, not just next season, but overall trajectory of the next few seasons of this club. It is
absolutely.
I mean, it's so cliche. We say this every year, but this is such an important off season for the club.
Most dramatic off season ever.
Trying to win the off season again. We're the 2015, 16, 17, 2022 off season champions. Put that on a
meme club 100%. Oh man.
Well,
that presser was just so I hated it. That's all I'm gonna say.
There was,
Well,
you know what the thing is, Jeff? There was
Mm.
no winning. They couldn't have done anything aside from maybe Bill Manning stepping down that would have made the fan base happy.
So then get it over with. Don't wait 3 weeks.
I agree. I
know what I mean?
wholeheartedly agree with you.
Get it over with. Finish it. Like give it the respect that you think it deserves. That was communicated loud and clear in this 3-week delay, and just treat it the way that you want to treat it, and don't sugarcoat it.
There were
Because
teams that
we're
were
sophisticated.
in the playoffs, Jeff. There are teams that were in the playoffs that did their end of season press conferences before Toronto FC did their
Yeah.
end of season. press
Yeah, I was
conferences.
about to say.
I was like, wait, you still have you're still playing. What
You're still playing. Yeah. No.
Yeah, I know.
How can it fill you with any kind of confidence? It had the complete opposite effect.
John Herdman.
And the fact that
John
the
Herdman.
fact that was
He got
John
me.
Herdman telling me that
He
people
got
are
me.
confident because they're in their pajamas 24/7. I get my confidence back when I have pajama jammy jam. Yeah.
Speaking of pajamas, I'd like to get those on. So let's end the show.
Let's go.
That was my segue.
That was your segue into a new show.
I got
Love
a
it.
quiche burning.
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, thank you everybody
right.
for tuning into another Toronto Till I Die episode. We see you live in the show comments. Thank you for just contributing to that community. That's fun. I love going through those. If you're listening on podcast version, the reviews that have been coming in have been great. Thank you so much for doing those. Keep on doing those. Again, if you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts, reviews are great. Please leave one. If you're listening on Spotify, drop the 5 stars for us. If you're watching this on YouTube, or even if you're watching this on YouTube after the fact, give us a like, subscribe to the channel. It really does help. John, thank you so much for your time. As always, you're fantastic. TFC Republic, if you're not subscribed to it, what are you really doing?
Yeah, what's your problem?
I think you still do have 50%. Do you still have the special going on right now for subscriptions?
Yeah, so I mean, the subscribers can get a 10% discount, off the full year and the monthly. So yeah, just hit me up, go onto the site, and take advantage.
Yeah, absolutely. I sound somewhat smarter because John
Mike Newell's
Brunson-
doing a Groupon deal right now, like 50%
Hey,
off.
look.
Let's go.
Hey,
Let's
look,
go.
we have 3 reporters at an end of season press conference. The ones that go need support, so support them.
And and I likely won't be doing TFC reporting next season. So John is even more important moving forward. So
I think you just broke some news to John there, Mike.
Yeah,
I think I broke some
made
news
him
to
cry.
everybody, So.
Yeah.
I mean, to be honest, I wasn't really doing TFC reporting for the past couple of months. So
Yeah. And well, that's a whole other podcast. So we'll save it for next time. For Jeffrey P.
I've had my
Nesker,
finger
for Michael
over the
Singh-
damn.
I know. I'm trying to get there. For for Jeffrey P. Nesker, for Michael Singh, and for John Molinaro, I'm Mike Newell. We'll see you next time. Cheers, everybody.
And wait!
Let's all go buy some lottery tickets.
Oh man, we were such spring children at the
man.
time, right?
Mike,
Man, we had so much hope.
Oh.
So much hope. Just dashed.
oh my
Just
God.
dashed.
yeah.
Oh boy.
So
I mean, what more can we say?
I don't want to.
Yeah. Yeah. Like we've said a lot.
Yeah. I don't really know what else to say.
There is nothing else to say. Let's just move on, man.